What's up, everybody? It is Hannah Welton, and I am so excited to be here today. We're going to be breaking down some of my top 5 favorite Prince grooves. I worked with Prince from 2012 up basically through 2016 until his passing, and he actually discovered me on YouTube. So, I just want to encourage you guys to continue to work hard, continue to practice, continue to record your videos and get them uploaded, because you never know who's going to come across your work. And don't get discouraged, just stay the course. One day it'll work out for you the same way that it did for me. All right, so let's get started with groove number 1. Let's work. So with Let's Work, this is actually a really fun groove. It was one of the first ones that Prince really broke down for me. I'll go ahead and just play the groove for you guys first, and then we'll kind of dive into the technicality behind it all. So here we go. So initially, when I listened to Let's Work and I was breaking down the groove and kind of preparing for rehearsal, I came in a little heavy-handed with my right hand, and then he taught me that he wanted the tip of the stick on the top of the hi-hat to really get nice, even strokes, no accents on the downbeat. A lot of times we like to play a groove like that, like this, to really just kind of lay in that meter, but he wanted something like this. Very different, but it's the same rhythm and the same groove. So now I'll demonstrate for you how I played it initially, and then I'll switch into what he taught me. So, same groove, just a little bit different approach, and it's got a whole different life to it, right? Something else that he taught me for this groove in particular that I also carried with me just kind of into a ton of other grooves is always emphasizing the downbeat on the kick, like at the top of the phrase, accenting the kick hard on the 1, and then anytime you have sort of an 8th note phrase or like a pickup going into the next downbeat like this groove has, kind of play it a little bit softer, almost like a ghost note, so that the kick can kind of have this ebb and flow or this dance to it that almost makes it feel uneven, but it's still locked in time. So I can demonstrate that for you guys now with just like solid, even kick notes, and then I'll switch into what he taught me to kind of give the kick a little bit more life and open up the groove. The slightest difference in playing actually makes a huge difference in how it's felt and how it's portrayed, how it comes across, and also how it affects the listeners and grabs their attention. All right, groove number 2, Dose, would be the beloved Purple Rain. Purple rain, purple rain, oh yeah. And this song was so special to play. Of course, because it's had such a massive impact on the industry, and it was a huge success for Prince himself and his career. For me, I wanted to approach this song with the utmost integrity and just reverence to his vision and keep it as simple as possible. I know sometimes when we're playing ballads or we're playing slower songs, it can be tempting to try to fill all that space with parts, with more kick, more hi-hat, more fills, and we try to get busier to keep it interesting and fun for ourselves. But there's something to be said about the simplicity of just this beautiful groove and really allowing the song and the lyrics and the singer to shine and tell the story of this ballad. And so it's actually very similar to Let's Work. It's just a lot slower. And where Let's Work kind of had the softer hi-hat approach, this one does tend to lean toward and cater to the more rock approach, which would be a little bit heavy-handed. It drives a little bit more with the accents on the downbeat, but still not too overbearing. right at the end of the phrase, you could add a little kick pickup, or add just a little bit extra to kind of turn the phrase around and bring it right back to the top of the section of the song. But that's what I played through the verse of Purple Rain, and then really the only thing that changed is that on the chorus I went to the ride cymbal and played pretty softly on the ride to really just let the cymbal sing through the chorus. And of course on the solo section I would most likely go to the bell and add some crashes and a few fills here and there to make it big and majestic. Okay, groove number 3 is 777-9311. Classic funk song, performed by The Time, and Prince created this drum part on a drum machine. And so sometimes I think that's part of the reason why it's been really hard for drummers, who are human, to recreate this drum part, because there's just such little nuances, and the meter itself, it just kind of ebbs and flows. It's on its own because it's a machine. And so there are sometimes things that are just harder to recreate when it's a person rather than a machine. And so I pick apart each individual aspect of the groove. So I'll listen to it and I'll pick apart, okay, what is the hi-hat doing specifically? Then I'll listen to it again and I'll say, okay, what's the kick doing specifically? And then I'll say, okay, how are those two married to each other? How do they come together? Where does the kick land with the hi-hat? What beats are they together? What beats are they separate? And then I throw the snare into the mix and do the same thing as well. So I'll try to play this groove slowly and break it down for you guys, because sometimes it's difficult to play slow. But we'll keep it moving. So one common problem that Prince picked up in how I was playing the groove and how I broke it down, and then he also mentioned that other drummers that he saw playing the groove did the same thing, is that we had this tendency to put an extra snare pickup on the of 4, so the very last 16th note going into the top of the phrase. We would just kind of add another snare pickup that wasn't there on the record. And so sure enough, when I went back to listen to see and break it down, there was no snare pickup. So make sure that we're not adding an extra snare as we're turning the groove around to go back to the top of the phrase. That extra snare pickup on the end of 4. Nice clean downbeat. 1, 2, 3, 4. Groove 4. We're breaking down mountains today. I said someday. And this one was particularly interesting because it's a very involved groove and it's busy already on its own, but I also had to hit the SPDSX sampling pad for those claps that we hear in the song as well. So I had to break down the groove first before I ever even tried to bring in the sampling pad, and I had to make sure I was confident in playing the part before we added that other element. So this one is 16th note based, and it starts on the hi-hat. now, once I got a really good foundation and kind of got comfortable in my hands with the part itself, then I had to add in the sampling pad, which came in on the and of 2. And so I'll demonstrate that now for you guys on the auxiliary snare, since we don't have the sample itself. A couple really cool pointers for this groove. First of all, when I broke it down, I cut it into 2 phrases. So the first phrase is just that first section between the kick, snare, and hi-hat. And then the second phrase is where the toms come in. So I didn't even move on to the second phrase with the toms until I really got comfortable with what goes on between the kick, snare, and hi-hat in the first part of the groove. So I broke that down very slowly until I really got it locked, and then I moved on and then put the 2 phrases together once they were both comfortable individually. So number 5, numero 5, is one of my all-time favorites, musicology.
Everybody party, over macho. People say, Prince, you got to go.
Such a funky groove. I mean, even on the record itself is so funky. But this one actually kind of went through a couple evolutions with me as Prince's drummer. I learned this groove initially off of rehearsal recordings that they had done previously, that I think it was John Blackwell at the time that he recorded. And so I learned his groove that he would play live for shows. So I'll demonstrate that groove for you guys, the first one that I learned, and then later on Prince kind of flavored it up again and made it even funkier. And so this is one of my all-time favorite grooves. So here's the first one that I learned that we ended up changing later. Super funky, super solid. It's an amazing groove already, right? You wouldn't think that someone would want to change that up a little bit. But one slight change that Prince made, and it took this groove over the moon, into the cosmos, to the funk galaxy, okay? So we just pushed back the snare that's on beat 4. I just played it solid on the downbeat for you. He pushed that back just a little bit and displaced it just enough to open up a little bit of space, create some tension, and then pick up, do a little snare pickup as we go to the top of the phrase. So check this out. Another cool thing that Prince wanted for this groove in particular is a little bit of a dance on the hi-hat. So you'll notice that not all the strokes are very even. There's kind of like a wave of crescendoing and going up and down with how I'm hitting the hi-hat. I'll show you again. Kind of some swelling, kind of going up and down, and it really just makes it dance. The slightest differences, I'm telling you guys, make a huge difference to the listener. It makes for a really fun experience. So these grooves in the context of a Prince show, it's actually pretty cool because he was such a versatile artist that you could play one groove for one song and then take that same groove into the very next song with just the slightest change, and it sounds and feels like a totally different genre and style altogether. And the grooves really take on a life of their own with just the slightest change up. And so he was really open to creative freedom and just really living in the moment. But the number one rule is that it always had to be funky. Okay, so there you have it. Some of my top favorite Prince grooves broken down for you guys. I hope you enjoyed this lesson, and I know I had a good time. Let me know what you think down in the comments, and if there's even some Prince grooves that I didn't throw out today that you absolutely love to play. Also, be sure to check out my course coming out on Drumeo early January 2022, we're going to be covering how to write the perfect drum parts. So you see here all these classic drum parts that I've already broken down here. We're going to dive in on how you can create your very own perfect drum part. I look forward to seeing you there. Be sure to check it out on Drumeo. Ha! We came to slay today! I can't, it's hard. Okay, I'll stop.